There's a very big gap as far as the education that they're not getting about nutrition and how important it is when it comes to the mental health of their children.
Welcome back to the Real Food Mental Health Podcast. My name is Cody Cox, and today's guest is Christina Moreira, and she is a nurse as well as a nutritional therapy practitioner. And our topic today is pediatric mental health, which is a fascinating topic because I think it's a very important topic nowadays as more and more parents and teachers and clinicians are very concerned about the mental health of our children. So we discuss specific conditions such as ADHD, autism, depression, and anxiety, and how epigenetics might be playing a role in such symptoms. If you want to support this podcast, go to ko-fi.com/Cody Cox. That's ko-fi.com/Cody Cox. Welcome to the Real Food Mental Health Podcast, where we explore the powerful connection between mental and physical health. My name is Cody Cox, a holistic nutritional psychotherapist, and I'm here to guide you on a journey to true wellness, mind, body, and spirit. If you're tired of quick fixes and want real solutions that address the root cause, you're in the right place. Let's get started on your path to lasting wellness. So, Christina, you are a nurse and a nutritional therapy practitioner, and you were telling me that you've been focusing lately more on pediatric mental health. What are the most common diagnoses that you're seeing right now?
So, just a little context. I have been working the past couple years in pediatric mental health. I work at a facility near where I live. And unfortunately, we are seeing a lot of anxiety, depression, self-harm, thoughts of suicide, and it's just ADHD. We do get kids that are autistic, that will be Baker acted. And it's a lot, it's a very complex, ADHD, they're on medication. Sometimes they do therapy, sometimes they don't. And it's really, there's a very big disconnect into nutrition and how, sleep is a factor. I get a lot of kids that tell me, I don't sleep, I'm on my phone. Or some kids that are doing virtual school, they'll sleep during the day, so their sleep cycle is totally off. And I mean, it's evident. We have a lot of kids that are very young that are vaping, and that can mess with their brain chemistry. I've seen vaping as young as 10, 11 years old. Weed as well. I tell the kids that weed can be synthetic and laced with God knows what. I did have a girl, I did talk to her about not accepting weed from somewhere because you don't know what they're putting in it, especially with kids. So she did say she was going to stop because one of her friends, she saw them like turn blue because I believe she told me they put fentanyl in it. And I think that friend passed away, but I don't remember at this time. But something did happen to him. So there's a very big gap as far as the education that parents are getting that they're not getting about nutrition and how important it is. And it's not their fault that they don't know. It's that nobody's telling them this information. And there's so many kids that are on medications. I mean, you're having, 7-year-olds on antidepressants, on anti-anxiety meds. They're on stimulants like Adderall, which is, a constant stimulant on the body all the time. So I can imagine the taxing for the adrenal glands. So we have to, I think, as NTPs, or if we're an NTP and a nurse, or you're an NTP and a doctor, just really bring that awareness if we do have clients, and just really being nurturing to that family because they do struggle. And it's painful as a nurse and NTP to see families struggle and seeing them oh, I don't know what else to do. Like, I've done everything, and they just get very frustrated with their kids and just with their lives, and I can't do anything. Especially the families that have an autistic child, depending on the level of autism the child has. And what I mean by that, are they verbal? Are they nonverbal? They could be 15, but mentally they're a 7-year-old. Their comprehension is just all not there. So that is a very, I know it's a very delicate, sensitive subject because I've cried with families in the office before. The resources, they just don't really exist in the area. And if they do, it's a long time to get help. And it's something that you don't want to see, but it happens a lot. And those rates of kids getting on medications and they're better, or their meds need to be increased, and okay, but there's so much else we can do besides medications are not the end all be all. I do have to say that there is a time and a place for medications. As a nurse working in the healthcare system for almost 20 years, I know the good medicine has, but there's so much other things that we can do for these families.
Yeah, I think it starts with the epigenetics too, where
Hmm.
it's really just about diet and lifestyle, and environment is part of that as well. But these are things that we can do ourselves that we don't necessarily have to see a doctor for or get a
Right.
prescription for. And you mentioned autism and how many kids with autism don't have the ability to get the help that they need. And I've seen that as a therapist too, where
Yeah.
therapists supposedly are qualified to work with autism, but I see it more as a neurological disorder rather than a psychosocial disorder,
Right.
which I might say is like depression and anxiety. Those could be a little bit more psychosocial, but even then, there's a biological component to them.
Absolutely.
And that's where even the autistic kids who are getting help, they're not really getting that biology addressed. And I know, especially with autism, we are seeing kind of a trend where they're moving toward this mindset of autism is incurable.
Right.
Therefore, I'm going to take this on as part of my permanent identity.
Hmm.
I'm going to be proud of it. And so because of that, they are saying I am autistic rather than I have autism,
Yeah.
because they're trying to be proud of that identity. And yet at the same time, I've also heard cases where children had autism, but then they were essentially cured of it through diet and lifestyle or the epigenetics.
Yeah.
So what would you say are the most important epigenetic pieces that help support autism?
So I just want to cover real quick, if anybody doesn't know what epigenetics is, it's basically our environment, our stress, lifestyle, what we're surrounded by, the way we live our lives, that will pull the trigger for illness, disease, inflammation, anything like that. So let's say if you're around toxins a lot, and if that's where you work and you're just exposed to it constantly, you may have some sort of autoimmune illness or arthritis or something like that because those toxins are affecting internally. So it is important to be aware of what we're doing every single day, so that way we don't pull that trigger um, for illness to occur. So how are you living your life, especially when somebody is trying to conceive to have a baby? But more so, like you said, things that we can do every day to control our epigenetics is limiting screen time, going outside, getting sunlight, going to sleep at a reasonable time, trying to get those 8 to 10 hours, depending, if you have kids, putting them on a schedule, taking their phones away. You can turn off their Wi Fi, you can turn off their internet at a certain time of day, limiting processed foods, limiting inflammatory oils, especially artificial colors, especially, for those that have ADHD, Red 40 is linked to that. Making sure they're getting good water, a nutrient dense diet. Like we did talk about, what is nutrient dense? Nutrient dense is whole foods, chicken, meat, bison, fish, Good carbohydrates, sweet potatoes, organic white rice, fruits, sprouted greens. Even also like the stuff that you're cleaning with in your home. What are you cleaning with? People don't often think about that because, like, oh, well, it's just harmless. Well, it's not harmless if you're using it 5 times a day. Like, I would probably have to keep, like, I clean my counters multiple times a day. So if when you're spraying something like cologne, any cleaner, it's an aerosol. So those drops, you're breathing them in. I have known people that, oh my gosh, like I've gotten a headache cleaning my bathtub. I'm like, oh, like, what are you using? Oh, I'm using this Lysol Clorox cleaner. I'm like, you need to get rid of that because that is not good for the body. There's many cleaners that can cause endocrine issues, cancer, respiratory. There's many people that will start sneezing. The same thing with body lotions, shampoos. I mean, it's everything. And we cannot control what happens outside of our home, right? We can't control what the hotel is cleaning their hotel with. We can control the four walls in our home, and that's really what I try to tell friends, family, clients, anybody. I go, if there's one thing, focus what's in your home. Get rid of toxins in your home. Start little by little. Even something as simple as replacing your plastic containers and go to glass. Something so simple as that. Not drinking water from plastic bottles. Get a stainless steel you can refill every day. So those are little things that really do go a long way.
And there are so many of these things I think a lot of people are still really
Hmm.
skeptical about. Like, it seems like I run into all the time where people are saying, "Oh, well, there's nothing wrong with drinking out of plastic or eating out of plastic. We've been using it for decades. It's fine. Look, we're fine. We're not getting sick." And it's like, "Well, you are getting sick. You're just not connecting it to your epigenetics."
Right. Yeah, look how many people, so not people, look how many women or couples are having a hard time conceiving nowadays.
Yeah,
That didn't happen 15 years ago. You didn't see that.
even just, we could say 5 years ago now is when the pandemic started, right?
Oh, right, yeah.
um, so the pandemic, I think, really caused a lot of infertility issues. My wife and I did home births,
Oh,
and
awesome.
we were talking to our midwife, who was saying, like, she's been a midwife for like 35 years. She's
Mm.
very well experienced, but she was like, yeah, most pregnancies did pretty well before the pandemic. It was like 1 in 5 pregnancies ended in a miscarriage. Now it's more like 1 in 3
Oh
or
my
2 in 3.
gosh.
Like,
Oh,
it's way more common to have a miscarriage or even just infertility in general where you just can't get pregnant.
yep. And that is because I think of, let's say, plastics. Even though you can't see that plastic is causing issues, if you're having health issues, that's something to look at. Just it's just like the body. Your body is like, I think we talked about like the funnel in NTP school, where you have this like funnel of, okay, our bodies can take so much. Once that, it's like a volcano. Once it's topped out, it's like, listen, I have done everything I can to support you internally, but like, girl, I can't anymore. It's just going to explode with dysfunction, and it's like a cascade. If your stomach is dysfunctioning, that can lead to endocrine. If this is dysfunctioning, your blood sugar can dysfunction, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think that's a good metaphor too. I forgot about that one, but our bodies do naturally detox, but when they're overloaded with toxins, they need a little bit of help.
Right.
And part of that help is reducing the exposure in the first place. You
Hmm.
mentioned using cleaners and even scented soaps, scented candles. There are so many things that people use every day that they think are harmless just because they're culturally normal.
Acceptable. Right. And
Yeah,
yeah,
acceptable and even encouraged in some ways.
and I'm Hispanic, so like, there's a brand that's super popular, and I've heard people, like, I've done some wellness expos this year. Oh my gosh, but I just love the smell of my house. And I'm like, yeah, just this is what I can do. Oh, but that's okay. So sometimes people are okay with knowing that it can do this, but they would rather have their house smell good. So it's
And that's where I'm like, I'm big on essential oils. I make sure
oh
they're
yes,
good quality, pure essential oils, not just the
absolutely.
cheap ones from the discount store.
And it matters. And just like you just said,
Yeah.
quality matters. So talk about discount store. I have a story. I was helping my friend like clean out her fridge, pantry, like everything. So she goes, "Oh, Christina, I got these oils as a gift, but I'm getting bad headaches." I go, "Let me see." And I told her before I read the label, I go, "I guarantee you it was made in China." Sure enough, the lavender oil was made in China, and I go, "We need to throw this away immediately because it's not pure." You know, and that goes with anything. Whether I tell people, I go, when you buy a car, when you buy a dishwasher, what is the first thing you're going to do? You're going to research. You're going to
Right.
compare
Unless you're
brand to
desperate, you'll just buy the
brand.
cheapest one you can
Right,
find.
exactly. But that doesn't happen so much because why? Dishwashers are expensive. So when you buy a dishwasher, it's going to be a well thought out process. Or, oh my gosh, my friends, I have 4 friends that use brand Bosch and they loved it. They've had no issues. Okay, well, we'll invest the money. It should be the same thing with our health. There should be no excuse as to why we shouldn't prioritize, buying good quality stuff that's going to benefit our body.
Yeah, and I think even nowadays, like, the poorest people still have a smartphone and access to the internet usually. So even if you feel like you don't have the money to really spend on high quality supplements or working with a practitioner, you can still do research.
Yeah, you can learn yourself, you can teach yourself. So, like you said, we have the tools as a society, but we're just stagnant and not as motivated. And I would say almost lazy because now everything is so instantaneous. We have Instacart, we have Amazon Prime, we have deliveries, people can come, you can go to Target and pick up your groceries. So in a sense, like, this whole media thing is making us lazy and not going to get the store. And listen, I'm not against any parent or family who's going to do Instacart because maybe they have a very busy day and that's the way to get groceries. Awesome. But if you can go to the store, like, go to the store, get up, walk, move, and look at the pandemic, the epidemic of obesity and chronic illness. We're not moving like we should because everything is okay. You want to work from home? Awesome. So we're not getting up, we're not socializing, we're just not doing what we're supposed to do. Therefore, we're working against our body instead of working for it.
Yeah, and you were talking about food quality and you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
artificial food colorings, red number 40 particularly.
Yes.
And my mind immediately went to just that skeptical person that I described earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hearing a lot of people who are like, "Oh, well, it's just food coloring. It's food dyes. It's just to make it look pretty. It doesn't do anything to the body." There are so many little things like that though that are just ubiquitous in American culture and in other countries too, but I think it's more so America because it's just so unregulated
Mm-hmm.
where I mean a lot of the dyes that we use in America are actually banned in Europe
Exactly.
because in Europe they recognize that it poses a health problem.
There's warnings.
Yeah, there's a warning. So what have you seen in terms of like particularly red 40? How does that affect mental health and maybe autism?
So I just want to spit out a little fact real quick since we're talking about this. In Europe, they're allowed to only use a few hundred chemicals in food. In the United States, they're allowed to use over 10,000 chemicals in food. So, for example, when they say natural flavors, I used to buy them because I'm like, "Oh, it's natural. Like, what could it be?" They don't tell you. So, like, let's say it's natural vanilla flavor. It is some chemicals that's made to taste like vanilla. So it's fake, it's man-made, it's chemicals. Now, what those flavors are, you have no idea. So I stopped buying as much natural flavors as I can. Um, and that's just something that, again, you don't really put your mind into and you don't really kind of connect the dots. So if you're buying Pop Tarts in the UK compared to the United States, in the United States, you have high fructose corn syrup, TBHQ, caramel color, red 40, yellow 6, and blue number 1. In the UK version, you don't have any of those flavors that I mentioned to you. And you have to wonder, okay, well, like, why? And I think we need to get better at questioning why can't we have, why is this being allowed? We have to be smarter than the manufacturer. We have to, because our kids' health is at risk for that. And they are paying the price, unfortunately. So, Red 40, you were saying, so it has been linked to hyperactivity in children. There's no benefit. And Red 40 is in so many products: Sour Patch Kids, Lucky Charms, Gatorade. And Gatorade is used every day for athletes, for student athletes, for adults. It's in yogurt. It's in soft drinks, candy, cake, cookies, fruit cups, cherry filling popsicles, toaster pastries, cereal bars, drink mixes. So you wonder, if Red 40 is in all this food, right, that's accessible in vending machines. And where are vending machines? They're in schools, elementary schools, they're in middle schools, they're in high schools. And if kids can buy whatever they want and they're drinking this, and now you have all these kids with ADHD, you have to wonder, where is this coming from? It's coming from the food industry.
Right. Yeah, and as you were describing how they've banned so many chemicals and ingredients in other countries,
Mm-hmm.
Europe especially, I was thinking, I think we only allow so much in America because we are a capitalistic society, and there are these big corporations lobbying to the government and saying we need to be able to use these things. Or if they're not doing that, they're at least defending. And like if the government says, oh, maybe we should ban Red 40, they're going to come after the government and say, no, we need to still have Red 40
Because it's
because this,
cheap.
this, and this, which is usually financially related, right?
It's all money related. And I did a food seminar in October. So I did this whole presentation on how to grocery shop and what to stay away from. And my big thing is that these companies spend millions, if not billions of dollars in their advertising. They're very smart. They know what they're doing. And who do companies market towards?
Children mostly.
Kids. Exactly. They'll put Bluey on there, those little squishy marshmallows that I've seen. They'll put anything on. That's why the colors are so pretty and they're so attractive, because, oh my gosh, I want to buy this. And in Publix, you'll see the cereals, buy one, get one. And cereal is expensive. I don't buy, if I buy cereal for my family, it's either the Cascadian Farms cinnamon toast or the Lovebird. That's what we'll buy at the house. But a box of Lucky Charms is like $7 or $8. It's expensive.
Is it really? It's been so many
Yes,
years since I bought
I
cereal. I don't
yeah.
even know.
I was walking down the aisle like curious, and
Yeah.
I saw the price. I go, what? I'm like, this is insane. I go, you could buy organic strawberries, maybe like a 2 pack, or at least organic blueberries for the same amount. Like, there is nothing nutritional about cereal unless you're getting it from a better brand. Let's say like Lovebird. Lovebird's a wonderful small brand. Or like Magic Spoon, or now I can't remember any other brands right now. Um, but there's nothing the kids are literally being fed sugar, and that's how you're starting the day. That's how most kids start their day.
Yeah. And even if
And
it's not sugar, I think people don't realize if it's an unsweetened cereal, it's still processed grains. And so
yep,
it's still processed in the body as pure glucose. So
yeah.
it's basically sugar, even if they don't add sugar.
Right, exactly, yeah. And they're sprayed with glyphosate, those grains, and that's no bueno, because that's a very bad pesticide that's been linked to a lot of health issues as well.
Yeah.
So it's the brand. There's an oatmeal brand. The brand is One Degree Organic Foods. So their oatmeal is sprouted oats, rolled oats. So on their bag, it has USDA organic, beyond celiac, gluten free, biocheck for non glyphosate, glyphosate free. So those are things you want to look for when you are buying oatmeal, and it's non GMO, vegan, kosher, all that stuff. And they sell this at Costco.
I think if you can't find that, I would at least look for organic. And I mean, organic technically is a marketing term, but it's also highly regulated, and that's another thing people don't seem to understand is they say, "Oh, organic doesn't mean anything, it just costs more." And yeah, organic foods might still have trace amounts of pesticides in America, but it's still a lot less because they're not applying it directly to the plants. And so I think it's still better to go back to your volcano metaphor. You want that volcano to be mostly empty. But if you're buying conventional cereals, it's not organic, it's got glyphosate, it's got other things in it, you're just filling up that volcano even more. I've seen sprouted oatmeal at Costco, and I was gonna say the preparation of your food makes a difference too. And so, especially when it comes to grains, soaking, sprouting, and fermenting,
Mm-hmm.
those are the best ways to prepare your grains or nuts or beans or seeds because it helps to reduce the anti-nutrients. It actually, in some cases, boosts certain nutrients like B vitamins
Right.
and just makes them more ultimately digestible.
Right. Yeah. And then you could absorb the nutrients, and you're not bloated or gassy, and just feel kind of yucky.
In a moment, Christina and I will discuss ADHD, but real quick, I just wanted to share with you that I've started an online group nutrition class called Restart. If you feel like you need some direction on how to get away from that lingering sugar habit from the holidays or get on the right track to better eating in general, this group is for you. This is an interactive group, not just a webinar. The first one begins January 30th and it goes for 5 weeks. It will be limited to only 10 participants, and my first group will enjoy a lower price. So sign up as soon as possible. For more information, go to beavercreekwellness.com/restart. So, how about ADHD? In my mind, as a therapist, autism and ADHD are pretty closely related because they're both neurological disorders,
Totally.
but they just manifest in different ways. It seems like ADHD is way more common. I'm seeing that in adults and children
Mm-hmm.
in a clinical setting. But are you kind of seeing that same trend in your work too?
Oh, yes. So much of it.
What would you do differently for ADHD compared to what you would do for autism?
Well, if I was working as an NTP with a client, remember, because I still work for a healthcare system, so I can't really do much there. But listen, I would definitely, if I had a kid with ADHD, I would have them fill out the paperwork. I definitely would want to see what they are doing. I would want to see also like what their sleep is like, what their diet's like, um, kind of just get like a more holistic picture. And what I mean by holistic, looking as that child as a whole, not just behavior. And also, seeing what the parents are doing as well. Um, are you letting them be on the tablet? Are they stimulated all the time? How are they starting their day? Are there rules in place for them? And obviously, if they're on medications, looking up those medications, if there's any nutrient deficiencies that those medications can cause, and just really helping to navigate that family into a way, even, recommending good quality essential oils if it's warranted, and getting them definitely on a supplement for cellular health. I would probably do the same thing with an autistic child because we don't really think a lot about cellular health because our cells are so tiny. We think more like, oh, I'm bloated. Let me take, some probiotic or sodium butyrate. Like, oh, well, I have inflammation. Let me take a fish oil. In NTP school, we're taught about, how we're like cells, and then tissues and organ system, and then the human body. So our cells are important because our cells talk to each other. Our cells, they have to work for our bodies to work. So if a child that has autism is most likely going to have some neurological inflammation, we need to address that cellular health for that child. And hopefully, with time, that will help. And I just want to say, too, a lot of times parents want a quick fix. I'm sure you probably see the same in what you do. Like, I
Yeah.
just want to feel better. Like, let me have a medication. That's really not the point of what we do, because we want that person to have lifelong health. I don't want you to have health or your child for a month. I want this to continue. That way, this child can thrive. He doesn't need an IEP. They don't need to go to ABA therapy. They don't need an RBT at school. They can live as normally as possible. And to understand, to getting to root cause, it takes a long time. And depending how long the body has been in dysfunction, it can take like 3 to 6 months or even a year or longer. So this is not something that is going to change overnight. And I think people need to understand that.
Yeah, I think we're conditioned, just you could call it culture, you could call it even government propaganda, but
Mm-hmm.
we are conditioned to focus on the symptoms
Yep.
rather than the whole person. And as you were talking about that, where it's important to focus on the whole child rather than just their behavior, I was thinking about the statistics. ADHD is far more diagnosed in boys than it is in girls, and I
Mm-hmm.
think it's mostly because of that behavior thing, where the girls are more likely to have the inattentive type of ADHD. So, I mean, they can still have it,
Right.
but it often goes unnoticed because their behavior is still calm and quiet on the
Mm-hmm.
outside. I
Right.
think it's I think it's actually in the Bible where it talks about how the world looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. And
Mm-hmm.
so as holistic practitioners, we want to look on the quote unquote heart, which essentially means the whole person. Like,
Yep.
what is this person eating? What kind of an environment are they living in? What are their relationships like? Because that definitely plays a role too. I feel like I have actually seen parents inadvertently teaching ADD or ADHD type symptoms to their children by, for example, just giving them an iPad to shut them up.
Right. Oh,
Where it's
oh
like,
my gosh, that's like you see that in like every restaurant. You
yeah,
know? And then how are you teaching your kids to socialize or behave in a public setting? They're not really. It's more convenient for the parent for them to have to be quiet than actually kind of discipline their kids and say, like, when I took my kids out, my kids are 22 months apart. I understand. I have two boys. We didn't do the iPad. I didn't give them a phone. They're teenagers now, but whenever I went out with them, I said, we're not crying, we're not whining, we're not kicking, we're not screaming. I warned them before we went out, and if not, then they would, get disciplined, verbally and get a warning. But they have expectations. They knew how to behave when we went out in public. Nowadays, it's like, so it's as if parents want to make parenting as easy as possible. And what I mean by that is just give them the phone. Just leave it alone. Well, okay, but not okay, because they're going to want a phone all the time and their brain is stimulated all the time. We have it's our job as parents to correct our children. It's our responsibility because we are raising future adults. Like there's so many kids that don't even know how to carry a conversation because they're on their phone all the time and they're not interacting with anybody. And
I
that's
even feel like I'm that way sometimes. And I mean, I'm an adult, but I'm young enough that I grew up mostly with screens. Like I watched a lot of TV in the
Mhm.
90s when I was growing up. We had internet in the 90s, but it was dial up, so I wasn't on it very much.
Right.
And then all of a sudden in the early 2000s, that's when people started getting DSL and just various forms of high-speed internet. And then it was, oh, when was it? Late 2000s maybe when wireless internet became more of a thing, and that's when everybody was on it all the time. And I think there are a lot of people, especially older generations, who are quick to assume, oh, it's the parent's fault, they're not a good parent. But to be fair, a part of that is biological as well. So going back to the food quality, like
Mhm.
what are you feeding your children, which I technically you could argue is still a parenting issue, but what are they eating?
Mhm.
That can make a huge difference on their ability to sit quietly and be patient
Oh, wow. Yeah.
and need or not need that screen to keep them occupied.
Yeah, and look at so we went to Canada for my birthday in November, and we were in Toronto, and you hardly saw a fast food restaurant, like no lie. It was mostly restaurants, smaller places to eat at. And we came back, we drove through the border and we came to Buffalo. Immediately, Wendy's, Taco Bell, Hortons, McDonald's, Burger King, like it was on almost every corner. And you just didn't see that in Canada. I mean, look at the people in Europe. They walk around a lot, and there's Chick-fil-A here, I mean, there's so much junk food, it's out of this world, and then we wonder why kids have problems.
Right.
And not and I you know and I'm saying this now because I had my own health journey with my son. I wasn't always like this. I didn't believe everything that I do now, let's say 10 years ago. This is a learning process. So, and this is not, and we're not, putting anybody down. This is just a lack of education that families are not getting. Nobody's sitting, not maybe they have a good doctor, maybe there is a good pediatrician that they have, and somebody is doing this. But for the majority of families, they're just not. I didn't get that. Like, I had a wonderful pediatrician. My son had eczema, and I was told he was going to grow out of it. I was getting creams. I'm like, oh my gosh, this can cause cancer. I'm not doing this anymore. And I finally, and as a nurse, I was always one to just ask questions, advocating for my patients. I loved to know, why is this happening? So I did that with my son. So a friend of mine told me about a holistic pediatrician that came down to where I lived in Florida. So I met him. He was the first person to tell me to avoid wheat, eggs, dairy, sugar, and to stop, recommended to stop um, administering the monthly things, vaccines. So I was like, okay. I didn't know that. So the more I learned about that stuff, my lifestyle totally changed. I was more vocal as a parent into the health of my children, and I think that as parents, as anybody who values their health, it's okay to question your physician. You know why? Because they don't know everything, and they're also human beings and they make mistakes. We all make mistakes. But it's also important because it is your health. It is your child's health. If you don't agree with something, or if you want to know why, please ask why. It's your duty. And if you don't agree with the way your physician is practicing, if it doesn't align with you, that's okay. You can feel free to disconnect with that doctor and go find somebody else that aligns with your beliefs, that's going to support you, and most importantly, that's going to listen to you. Those are the best practitioners that are out there.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I don't even claim to know everything about that there is to know about nutrition, mental
Same,
health, or these other
right?
things that we're talking about, which is why I build into my pricing time for me to do research on your behalf.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not just going to sit in front of you for 10 minutes like other practitioners and just pretend like I know all the answers.
Yep. Yeah, I tell my clients too, like, listen, if I don't know something, I will ask or I will research it, because we don't know everything, and that's a problem that physicians have, and I think that's why people feel so bad to ask them, because they're known to know it all just because they're a doctor. Well, I have news for
Mhm.
you, friends. Doctors probably get like one class of nutrition and that's it. They're taught to prescribe and they're taught to treat. That's what they do.
My cousin went to medical school and he said he got like a 2-hour seminar,
Mm,
is all.
I
And
believe
I
it.
mean, he's a doctor now, but that's all the nutrition exposure that he got in all of medical school was just 2 hours of a seminar. It wasn't even a class. It was just a seminar. And there are so many people out there who are like, "Oh, my doctor said I should eat this high carb, low fat diet, and it's okay to eat these processed foods as long as it's low fat."
Oh, yeah,
But
I would run from
really,
that
when
person.
yeah, I mean, really, when a doctor says that, they're just speculating based off of what they've heard from dietitians and
Mhm.
from the government. They're
Exactly.
not actually coming from training. Usually, there are
No.
some doctors that seek out that training.
Yeah, but they have to do yes, and if, like you said, if they do seek out the training, it's out of their pocket. They
Yeah,
want to do that. They're not taught to do that. And remember, the medicine pharmaceutical industry is a billion-dollar industry. The health insurance is another thing. You need a diagnosis, you need this. So let's say you're going, I had somebody tell me I think they were a nurse practitioner, and your doctor really only has maybe 15 to 20 minutes with you. So if you need to bring up another issue, like, okay, we need to cover that another time, like, well, now I have to make another appointment, probably 2 to 3 months, to discuss my other thing. So it's, you're going on this hamster wheel of going back, getting questions, going back, feeling frustrated. And then let's say you have an autoimmune disease and you're working with your rheumatologist and, let's say, endocrinology and your primary. And I told one lady, I go, she had an appointment for, I think it was for endocrinologist, and she was just very frustrated with, the care she was getting. I go, those three doctors don't communicate with each other. They're not comprehensively sitting down and say, okay, what are we going to do for Patty Sue? No, your primary is doing their own plan. Your endo is doing their own plan. Your rheumatologist is doing their own plan. So then you're still frustrated because none of the doctors are talking, they're confused, and you're just like, okay, I guess I'll take this and kind of see what happens. And it's not comprehensive holistic care. It's very individualized and not well thought out with the patient in mind.
I think
When
the closest you're going to get is integrative, where to
Mhm.
me, integrative means that they are kind of talking to each other and collaborating, where you sign a release of information to allow your doctor to talk to your other practitioner, your
Mhm.
therapist or nurse or whoever it may be, but they only have like a 5-minute phone call. Like it's not really that holistic or
No.
as collaborative as you might think it
Right.
is.
And I think what's really nice about what we're doing as NTPs is that we collaborate with other people. So, like, let's say, I have a kid who's autistic, and I know of a really good therapist that believes in nutrition, quality supplementation. So, you partner together with somebody and saying, all right, okay, how are we going to help this person? Like, you can work together to still help that individual. And the nice thing is, as a NTPs, we do take the time, like you said, you factor in the time in your pricing, which as you should, as anybody should, because we're doing and we're advocating for that person who doesn't know how to research, who doesn't know how to look up stuff. So we are in sense their voice. We are helping that person, along their health journey. And it's just really nice to I'd say, I'm sure you probably feel like this, but you almost feel like a detective. Like, okay, well, now it's time to put on my detective work and see what's not lining up in the body. Where, like the one client I have now, she doesn't drink like any water. She like literally drinks coffee all day. So that's something, I'm gonna have to address. But just, there's so much time that's put into the work that we do as NTPs, and it's so detailed. And I really think that is such a beautiful gift, to the clients that we're serving, that they trust us. And a lot of times, you did mention emotional traumas. A lot of times, disease can be trauma related when we're holding all that stuff in and not releasing it out. And depending, kids who have, let's say, been abused, whether physically, verbally, sexually, they carry a lot of that stuff, and that also if they haven't had a good therapist, that can lead to anxiety, depression, self-cutting from all those things that they've dealt with.
Hmm.
So finding a good therapist to help work through that, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up trauma because there definitely is that psychological piece to the mental illness
100%.
where you do need that
Hmm.
psychological help from a therapist or another qualified practitioner. But then at the same time, you still want to address that epigenetic side of things too, the
Yes.
biological side, where if a person is traumatized, they are going to resolve that trauma so much more effectively and so much quicker if they're eating a nutrient dense diet, they live in a clean environment, they're drinking plenty of clean water throughout the day,
Yeah, they're
and if they're
sleeping.
sleeping well.
Yes. Oh, sleep I think is so underrated. People are like, "Oh yeah, like I can function on 3 to 4 hours." I'm like, "No, you can't." You think you can?
Sleep is your body's way of processing its own trauma,
Mhm.
especially in the REM cycle of sleep, the rapid eye movement, because I do
Mhm.
EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Oh.
So that eye movement part is actually a key part of the trauma processing when I'm doing EMDR. But EMDR really is just mimicking the REM cycle of sleep. So
Mm.
if you're sleeping well and you're getting a lot of that REM, you're going to do really well. You might still need some therapy,
Yeah.
but you're going to do so much better than if you're not sleeping very well.
Right, yeah, and even sometimes, like, let's say, I think it was this week, I think I got maybe like 7 hours, but it wasn't, I felt it that it wasn't good quality of sleep. So I was
Yeah.
still kind of tired. And I think too, helping educate people to really be body aware of their mind, spirit, being connected with yourself. And what I mean by that is, I was telling my kids this yesterday, mind body connection is important because you need to recognize, oh gosh, I was with this friend and she just made me like so anxious, like she's just so negative. Okay, now that you're aware of that, do you really want to be around somebody like that? Is it time to maybe distance yourself? Like for me, if I eat gluten, I get like itchy, like right by my armpit line. So I know that. So I'm like, okay, if I eat this, this is what's going to happen. I'm talking body awareness. And I don't think
Mhm.
that we really do that as a society and as individuals. We just kind of do stuff and just deal with it. But why should we have to deal with it? You know what I'm saying? Like, we shouldn't have to. We should be conscious of, okay, if this makes us feel this way, I'm not going to do this. Or if I know it makes me feel this way, I'll deal with it or maybe not, do as much.
The Western medical system really kind of teaches us to ignore the body other than
Yep.
when we're in pain and we need our doctor's help. And
So right.
I mean, I'm trying to be careful with my words. I don't want to demonize them because I do think Western medicine has their place,
100%. I couldn't more
but
agree.
it is being abused in some ways in that we are not taught to be aware of our bodies. We are not taught to respect our bodies.
No, at all.
But I can see how this all evolved into what we have now in the United States because it is a very lucrative business
Oh
model. And
yeah.
that's essentially what it is. It's just a business.
It's a money model. Healthcare is not healthcare. Healthcare is sick care. They profit 100% on people being sick. Like, oh my gosh, let's say you work in the ER. Oh my gosh, well this guy, he's been back 5 times and this is his fifth heart attack. And and you have to think, why is this guy coming back? Something is happening. Nobody's telling him to do anything to change his lifestyle. you know there's no education on that. And I tell people, like I think I said earlier, Western medicine has a place in time, 1,000%. Medication in crisis is a wonderful thing, but it's not the end all be all, and it's not something that we should go to every day. If you're sick, if you like really sick, sepsis, broken bone, hemorrhaging, trauma, car accident, need a blood transfusion, like yes, please go to the hospital. But your urgent care shouldn't be your primary care, and you shouldn't be running to the primary every time your kid has a fever.
Right.
We also need to understand that our body was designed to fight infection. That's why we have an immune system. Parents I see they get so nervous when their kids have a fever. I have not used Tylenol or Motrin in my house for years with my kids. I use essential oils because those medications do things to the body, not in a good way. I let my kids fight the fever, and obviously you want to be smart about it. The fever is what kills the virus. It's working for the body, but we're taught. I used to alternate Tylenol and Motrin. I used to do that when they were younger. I don't do that anymore. I know better now. And it's, like I said, educating people on that, like, hey, it's okay for, like, you want your body to have an immune response. That's what it was designed for.
Yeah.
So the Western medicine is a sick healthcare system. It's not for your health. If it was for your health, then insurance would cover chiropractic, it would cover acupuncture, it would cover what's another
Massage.
massage, cupping, things like that supports the body.
I have noticed that like doctors are incentivized. They are financially
Hmm.
incentivized to keep you coming back
Yep.
because like if they prescribe you a medication and you need to come back every
To get a
couple months
refill.
to get that medication adjusted, they make like I don't know what it is at this point, but I think it's like $300 for like a 10-minute visit.
Well, yeah, or if
And
you have a side effect from that medication, then you're going to get another medication for that side effect.
right, and so they are heavily incentivized to keep you coming back rather than to help you get well.
Crazy.
And that's really kind of where the medical system in the US is pretty corrupt, in my opinion.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying that it's perfect in other places, but if we could somehow get away from that big business side of things, I think we would all be healthier.
Yeah, that would be a dream, but I honestly don't think that's going to happen. I've been in
Yeah,
healthcare for a long time, and it's not it's not going to change. But the nice thing is about it is that we as NTPs have our own practices where we can make an impact on those that come to us for help, and
right.
then they tell other people. So we are definitely working on making our mark, and that's a beautiful thing in and of itself for sure.
So, as one last segue, coming from the Western medical model, you mentioned kind of the work that we do as nutritional therapy practitioners. What would you say to the skeptic after all of this who's like, "Oh, well, my disease is just genetic." If something like ADHD were genetic or autism were genetic, like how would you approach that?
I would ask them, how do they know? And do you want that to continue in your genes? Do you want to continue to pass that down if you believe? If you believe that, because if so, then that means though that ADHD or autism, whatever, is going to keep passing down. Would you want that for your future generations? And if not, there's a way to stop it.
That's where, as therapists, even in graduate school, I went to a pretty conventional graduate school and I was even taught about intergenerational trauma,
Mm,
which, like, from a nutrition standpoint, you could argue that um, just being nutritionally underprivileged could cause intergenerational trauma. For instance, if you've got something like ADHD that
mhm,
might be caused by gut issues or other biological things, yeah, you could pass that down to your children, to your grandchildren, and
mhm.
that could be called intergenerational trauma. There's a psychological part of that too, but you can change your genetics.
Right.
And that's another thing that we're not really taught is like we were talking about epigenetics earlier, the word
Mhm.
genetics is in there
Right. Exactly.
implying that diet, lifestyle, and environment are affecting our genes.
Your gene expression, right? Like you said, we can absolutely control that, but also too, Western medicine teaches or ingrains in us and almost, yeah, you're gonna have it. How many doctors will say, yeah, they're probably gonna have it too? So then you believe that. Why are we believing that? And why are we not empowering? And the other thing too is that I don't think that people really take their health in their hands. They
Yeah.
don't understand that their health is their responsibility and nobody else's. And there's no one else to blame but yourself at the end of the day. And as harsh as that sounds, that's just the honest truth. If, you know, let's say for parenting, if I just let my kids do whatever they want, that I can let them eat whatever they want and they're bouncing off the walls, I have nobody to blame but myself because I am allowing them to do that instead of saying, okay, like we're not buying that at the grocery store. We're not doing that. I need to take responsibility for what I bring into my home because it either benefits my family or it doesn't. Just like friendships, just like relationships. If you're in a toxic friendship, get out of it. Nobody's telling you to stay. You have a choice, but it's like, what are you going to do with it? And at the same time, we know as NTPs and as people have their own, we all have our own health journey. And we can't force anybody to work with us because they need to be mentally ready to want to make that change. And I think people slowly need to and I think they're understanding that nobody is responsible for their health besides them. Not their doctor, not their spouse, not their parents. It's all you. It's all you. What are you going to do about it? If you're
Yeah.
tired of
Well
it, make
said.
a change.
Yeah. And I mean, doctors, nurses, therapists, we're all healthcare providers, right?
Yep.
But to be honest, it is our job. I mean, we don't really have that vested of an interest in getting you well
Hmm.
as much as you should.
Right.
So, I mean, you should take that responsibility. Yeah, we're here to help you. That is our job to help you, but
Right.
it's not ultimately up to us whether or not you get better. So you have to engage in these healthy practices to change your epigenetics. And I was going to kind of circle back to the genetic thing. I
Hmm.
did hear a couple years ago that it's only like 6% of our health is actually inherited from previous generations.
Hmm.
The rest of it has to do with diet and lifestyle. And so there are some things that you're just born with and you're going to have for the rest of your life. Like maybe it's cerebral palsy or some
Oh,
other
yeah.
condition that you can't heal from just from nutrition and
Yes.
lifestyle.
Absolutely. Yes. 100%.
And so those there are some exceptions to what we were saying, at least with
Of
that,
course.
but
Yes, there definitely are.
you can improve your lifestyle anyway, even if you have some genetic condition.
Hmm.
It is only that 6%, and the rest, that 94%, is epigenetic.
Yeah. Like you may not cure, your Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, but you can slow it down. You can have symptom improvement. You can have better quality of life. And, I'm sure you may do the same thing, but, in my client agreement with that I have for clients, I put in there that your results are based on the work that you do. I help you with recommendations. I am there by your side whenever you need me, but ultimately your result is a part of what you put into it. And that's really important because you're giving your client that power that they're looking for, and then once they are disciplined and consistent, they're like, oh my gosh, like I really can do it. But it's up to them. We're not miracle workers. That's not our job. Our job is to help that person, guide them, and help them do the work.
Yeah, totally. One last question I want to ask you, Christina, as we are coming up on the end of our episode. If there were one thing, just one thing that you could change about the way people approach health and wellness, what would it be?
I would say to have an open mind and welcome new ideas and learn about your body and just be very open minded to it.
Also, if people wanted to find you, where can they find you?
So, my website is www.cheerstohealthrn.com. I have a Facebook page that's Cheers to Health RN. I have an Instagram page that's Cheers to Health RN. And I also have, it's like a personal page too on Instagram, but I'll share like, some things. So that's Christina's _ health corner. So you can find me there. My cell phone is 386-346-7957. If you're interested, I do a complimentary 30-minute call with anybody. And yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Christina.
Thank you. This was fun.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you leave a review. That really helps me out. And also subscribe to the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. Real Food Mental Health is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. The information presented on this podcast is not intended to replace any medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. While I am a healthcare provider, I am not your provider. Always seek the advice of an appropriate healthcare practitioner with any personal questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. Reliance on information provided by this podcast is at your own risk.